Now I'd like to turn it over to Shirley Kane, Technical Expert Lead with JBS International, to kick off the webinar.
Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to our awesome series of webinars. We're JBS International and National Association for Children of Addiction are co-sponsoring a series of webinars, and this is our second in our series. And it's to provide people, grantees, and other people who are seeking that knowledge with tools and knowledge to support all of our babies and the families who need our support, and especially our babies who have parents who have substance use disorder. And I want to just say miigwech, thank you again to all the awesome presenters that we'll have here today. And thank you for taking your time and giving your energy and your support for this series. And our first speaker is Larry Williams. And Larry is a trainer for Celebrating Families, an awesome curriculum. And he's also in the program, is the program and president of Williams Training Consultants LLC. Mr. Williams, take it away.
Thank you, Shirley, and I'm so excited to be here today. We have an exciting time for us. I've been a trainer for Celebrating Families program for many years, and I feel privileged to be able to be you guys' moderator for today. And so I'm going to have the ability to introduce each one of our presenters. These are our presenters for the day, and I am going to give you just a little tidbit of information about each one of them before they share their presentation. And so today, to get us started, our first presenter is the presiding judge of the Juvenile Court Division at Santa Clara County, and that is Judge Catherine Lucero. And she's going to be sharing with us her insight from sitting on the bench in family court. One of the things that I've discovered about her when I did my research is that she is really an extremely strong advocate for children and family. And so, Judge, we welcome you to our panelist list today. It's your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. I started my legal career more than 30 years ago as a prosecutor, and I have been on the bench now for 21 years. I have specialized my entire career with cases involving children and families. I represented children in the child welfare courts when our DA handled that representation in this county many years ago. And I've seen firsthand the negative impact that addiction has on families, and especially on children. No matter what court I have presided over in this last 21 years, adult criminal, child welfare court, juvenile delinquency court, family court, the primary issue is addiction. And I see the devastating effects it has on generations of children and adults. And because I've been around so long, I've actually seen the children come in to the criminal courts of the parents that I had in the child welfare courts. Addiction is a family disease, and when the parent is in active addiction, the child is in crisis. And when a child is in crisis after being raised in the dysfunction and the environment of addiction, then the family is in crisis, and around it goes. This is not a moral or poor character issue. It's a behavioral health issue, and most people want to get better and to be better. Addiction is a family disease that cycles for generations, perpetuating trauma, victimization and suffering, hopelessness, which leads to more futile attempts at self-medication, loss, and addiction. Celebrating Families is child-centered, culturally respectful, trauma-informed, evidence-based. It's a tool to begin to heal families because we cannot fix families. But we can offer them healing and transformative tools that allows a family to make a way back to one another. Families who find themselves in our court systems are truly at the mercy of our government systems. And it is our moral obligation to provide a way for families to be a family again. When the state tells you that you cannot be a family because of the devastating disease of addiction, The state is obligated to make a way back. Celebrating Families is a non-judgmentally designed program that brings the parents and children together to learn about the cycle of addiction, the impact that they each feel when addiction is active, and it helps a family give words to what they are experiencing and, even better, tools to move forward. I call this real help for real people. It is the heart work that is so necessary to provide hope to families. It is the ability to practice what they are learning under the guidance of experts who understand both parenting and addiction. Celebrating Families promotes resiliency and the possibility that the next generation, in seeing their parent heal, will know that even if they are personally afflicted by addiction later in life, that people can heal and stay a family, that people can heal in connection with one another, not in isolation from one another. That is what life is. It's a series of failures and learning from one's mistakes. Our court families are not unique in that way. Usually, child welfare courts are all about separating families, but Celebrating Families is about bringing families together with trained experts to gently help them back to one another. I have sat through several classes of Celebrating Families, and I have seen the medicine of this tool. When parents get to learn how to parent clean and sober with the guidance of this curriculum, the hard edges fall away, fear dissipates, and miracles do happen. Celebrating Families has always been ahead of its time. It's always known that learning to parent without the child present is like trying to learn to ride a bike without the bike. Parents and children together in a safe place with trained experts allows for bonding, forgiveness, and real change to occur. And what comes about is that priceless key to make all things possible: hope, followed by faith. I hope that you will consider offering a Celebrating Families component to the work that you do with children and families in your jurisdiction. No matter what a parent has done, no matter how inadequate the parenting became because of addiction, a child still loves that parent. And we know that a child yearns for family connection, even after they are adopted and put into a permanent placement. The state is not a good parent. Let's have our children see their families heal and be allowed to heal alongside them. The Families First Services Prevention Act realized this fact, and now our jobs more than ever are to keep our families together. Breaking cycles of addiction and heartache requires that we all go the extra mile to ensure that we have done all that we can to give that family a chance at transformation and healing. I remember clearly one day in my family dependency court, which used Celebrating Families, when her mom and dad were graduating and the case was being dismissed. An 8-year-old girl was standing there with them, glowing and smiling and sparkling with happiness, and said, "Judge, thank you so much for giving me my parents back." That is proof that every detail counts. That 8-year-old had been given a voice and she felt safe and seen. And there are countless other stories like this one. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan of Celebrating Families. Thank you so much for letting me share my experience, letting me share what I have seen, letting me share that Celebrating Families works. And thank each of you for helping our families and making our planet a better place. Please enjoy the rest of your webinar.
Thank you so much, Judge, for being willing to share that insight with us, just simply about how Celebrating Families gives hope and how the individuals who've been a part of your court have found Celebrating Families and been able to get that ability to have hope again. So thank you so very much. Our next presenter is going to be Tony Welch Torres. And Tony's worked for over 30 years in the field of addictions and mental health. Her primary focus has been on youth and families. She's a national trainer for NACOA, the National Association for Children of Addictions. She is a master facilitator at the Celebrating Families and the Spanish version of Celebrating Families, which is Celebrando Families. Tony, you want to share your insights with us?
Thank you, Larry. I can't wait. So welcome. I'm here to tell you what Celebrating Families is, why it works, what I see day in and day out. So I work at a large mental health agency in San Jose, California, and we were one of the original pilot sites for the Celebrating Families program. So I will say for over the last 16 years, I just kind of added it up, over 2,000 families. And some of these families have 2, 3, 5, 6 kids. So we've really served a lot of families. This program, what is it? It is a 16-week program that is, each session is designed to serve the families. So let's go ahead and put the slides on and show people what we're talking about. Thank you. So let's go to the next slide. As Judge Lucero said, the reason I love this program more than any other thing that I do is it does provide hope. Hope to people that are coming to us hopeless. It provides health techniques every week and healing. And what's also so beautiful about this program, you heard how it has served our courts and families in the system. It also works in the schools, inpatient settings, outpatient settings, churches. It's one of the most flexible models you can be exposed to. So it really, really does help our families in whatever settings we may be serving them. Definitely something that we know is different from other programs, because each week families are learning the skills so that they not only stay clean and sober themselves, but can be a parent. And we're there as guides on the side to teach them and to support them through that process. So again, it is a 16-week program that develops these healthy living skills and addresses addiction and recovery in every session. It is trauma informed. So as the judge mentioned, we know who we're serving, and we're very, very cognizant of being strength-based, not focused on the challenges or the problems, but really building on people's support so that they can get their kids back. In fact, every beginning of a group, I always tell them my goal is that every one of you will graduate this program, and we're going to support you through that process. Next slide, please. So let's look at some of the goals. We want to increase the protective factors. We know that there are things that happen in each community that this program is serving, but we look at not only the community risk factors, but the individual risk factors of those families. What can they do to increase those protective factors and decrease those risk factors? One of the reasons that I've always just been drawn to this program is one of the main objectives, which is to break the cycle of addiction in families. And as was mentioned by the judge, certainly she sees the next generation. Sometimes I will see up to 4 generations. Grandparents come in, the children of those children, and the great-grandchildren, where addiction and mental illness and a variety of other domestic violence abuse has all been there. So how do we break that cycle? How do we really do that? Because even when a parent gets clean and sober, we see that addiction and other high-risk behaviors will still present themselves. So that's what's so exciting. By serving the whole family at this point in the recovery and breaking that can really break the cycle. We see that kids who are exposed to this program use less, they don't use as early, they learn healthy coping techniques. So again, you're working with the entire family, and each of them are learning to take care of themselves, be healthy, and be whole. We also see that one of our objectives is to decrease the use of alcohol and other drugs. And we see that every week. Families may relapse during the program, but we see for most, and I will say 80% of the individuals who come through the program graduate, which is really outstanding, because the majority of families we serve are either living with a family member, some of them are homeless, some of them are in treatment centers. But the fact that despite all of these other risk factors and challenges going on in their life, they are able to graduate and in many cases get their kids back is just amazing. So we do see reduction in substance abuse, And we also see that one of our goals is not only to work with the treatment courts, but all other agencies. I want to talk just for a minute because we talk about breaking the cycle of addiction. So we're not just talking about substance use disorders here. I see many participants who come through struggling with gambling, sex addiction, even video and other kinds of addiction. So we see wellness come in, no matter what it is that has really brought them to this place. So it really does work. Next slide, please. It's unique in that it focuses on the prevention of the children, meaning our goal is not that those kids won't just use, but that they won't enter relationships with other people who have addiction, that they will learn that their feelings are valid. They learn to take care of themselves. They learn the healthy living skills themselves. We know that it's unique because we know that the majority of people that we serve also are struggling with other mental health issues and often physical health as well. And so all of this whole model is addressing this. What I love on the first night of Celebrating Families, when all those individuals walk through the door or currently get online, you see the big picture. You see the family, you see the infant, you see the 5-year-old, you see the 12-year-old who acts like the parent of the family. You see the partner sometimes, or maybe the mom's dropping them off, grandma, and she's pretty angry because oftentimes she's had a daughter or a son who's been in multiple programs. So you see all of those struggles, and yet there you are with open arms saying we can do this together, giving them hope, helping them to heal, giving them the confidence that they don't have. Healthy living skills is built in every week. And this is so important because our families aren't getting enough good food. They're not getting good sleep. They don't know how to have healthy relationships. And you'll learn more about that. But this is a core foundation to the model. It is identifying those risk factors, as we talked about, those protective factors, which we focus on every session. All 16 sessions builds on those protective factors. And what's super cool about this model, I live in San Jose, California. It is one of the most diverse communities, has multiple language groups. And so we offer the program certainly in Spanish, which is the Celebrando Familias. We do the English. We also have groups in Vietnamese. And when we don't have enough for a full group, we have translators who make sure that this program works for all. Some of the distinctives, next slide, please, is that each week there are specific things. I love the first one, acts of kindness. Our kids every week learn how to give back to the community. And they build this chain. So they're not just talking about it. We're doing games and activities and animals. It's just, stuffed animals, but still we're having fun every week. And acts of kindness is a beautiful one. If you see the little picture there, there's one of this is a school in San Jose, a Spanish speaking group. And this little 6-year-old is centering. Now, there he is learning to do stress reduction along with his mother. And this is something that he can use whenever he's feeling anxious and stressed out. So that's one of the things that we teach for all members of the family. The other one I love, I'll just share with you, is wow moments, wonders of the world. Our kids, our parents who have not been able to see the beauty in this world because they've been veiled with the pain of addiction, now can see that flower, that tree, that ocean, and they come in and share it. And so that's part of the recovery. That's part of the brain wellness, is being able to see that there is beauty out there. The next slide, please. We know that family-focused services are working. And why? Look at this. It doubles the rate of reunification in less time. That's huge. Why does this work? Again, because you're working with the whole family. And that's important because, like was mentioned, how do you learn to ride a bike without a bike? So same thing, we model being together as a family. They practice eating together. They practice talking together, sharing their families, giving affirmations week after week. They get to learn that skill together as a family. And here we are as coaches, guides on the side, supporting them through that process. Think about a situation where a father in our program had relapsed about third week into the group, and he's with his partner who uses as well, who's struggling with her own mental health issues, 6 kids. And even though dad relapsed because it was his birthday, it was hot summertime, what was so cool is the rest of the family continued to come. And as a result of that, dad's relapse was really small. You know, mom told me if before she would have started drinking with him and said, screw it, this doesn't work. But she didn't. And the kids kept going, and dad joined her back, and they continued to recover and graduate that program. And so we see those kinds of things happen. No shame about relapsing. He learned more about his illness. He learned what his triggers were, which was summertime and being in his neighborhood. So he said, next year, I'm taking my whole family to the movies. I'm not even going to be around on my birthday. So there's opportunities for learning. And when we looked at the relapse, it was not about, you know, again, was mentioned any kind of moral failure. It was about, hey, what part of your healthy living circle did that affect? All of it. And he didn't want to do that for himself or his children. So I see day in and day out that family focused services work. It increases parents' parenting skills. We measure that, we see it. And again, it will decrease the risk of relapse and reoccurrence so that they don't have to go back into the programs. So let's go on to the next slide. And so I can show you what this program looks like. So here it is. You know that it's 16 sessions, and I'm going to tell you what those sessions are about. But here's what happens when families come together. Okay, this is super cool. The 0 to 3 time. That's where we are with those little ones under 3. We're bonding with them. And it's not me, it's the parent and the child. In fact, the parent and the child is our client. And we're supporting them in order to learn to read their baby's cues, how to hold their baby, how to be able to read. Does that baby need to be changed? Does that baby need to be fed? Does that baby need to be held? And in that 0 to 3, we have all those little developmental stages. So that's their time to bond and to connect. After, this is a fun part too, we have a meal together. Again, this is pretty cool because we've got these families, they're eating together, and we're serving them a nutritious meal, food, a main meal. It doesn't have to be an elaborate meal, but we focus on health. So it's always got fruits and vegetables and a main dish, and we help them to eat together. Again, we'll talk about why that's so important in a second, but everybody has their family style meal together. Then what happens is we break into our groups, and they get to practice the same activities all together. So if the focus that week is communication, they're all learning communication, of course, focused on their developmental stages. After everybody's in their separate groups, they come back together and practice what they've learned. So this is just a quick overview of our in-person model. What's super cool is this model works online or virtually as well. So we went to that over, well over a year ago, last March. And we have seen outstanding results. So we have this model that we do online. Minute this happened with the pandemic, Nicola got to work, we created an online training, and now we have this model happening. And at my agency right now, we're currently doing it, I think at least 8 groups using the virtual model. So it can work virtually as well. Talk about the family meal for just a second, next slide. And that is super important, because we know the research shows that those families who eat together are less likely to have kids who struggle with alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. We're teaching, we're having families bring back those values and traditions sometimes that are lost through addiction. And we know how many traditions are involved with food, whether it's a Sunday morning breakfast or every Friday night we have a family night, whatever that is, but they get to practice that. And sometimes that's challenging because, one of our first graduates, she had never eaten at a table. The kids and her ate in front of the TV, they ate in the car, they ate on the floor, but they never sat at a table and talked. And so how exciting it was for her to learn this process. And when she graduated, we found her a table. So the meal is really important. It builds predictability, routine, and certainly traditions. So let's go to our next slide. Watching my time here. Here are the 16 weeks. Here are the topics. And again, as I mentioned, it builds on itself, and each person in that family is learning the same things at the same time. You see the core of the model, sessions 7, 8, and 9 are really addressing addiction straight on. Whatever's going on in your community, session 7, whatever it is, if it's vaping, if it's opioids, we address, the drugs that are available, average age of first use, how to prevent that for your kids. We look at aid addiction as a disease, really focused on brain chemistry and how to heal your brain. Session 9 is a role play. And I see week after week, families go through this program and it changes their lives. They learn for the first time, wow, I was that child that grew up with it in addiction, and now my kids are experiencing the same things. How do I break that cycle? So these sessions really do build on each other. And 16, Cooper, super cool. That's our celebration. And we'll tell you about that in a letter from a mom just shortly. Next slide, please. I think what's so important about this program is people learn about their disease. I'm shocked about how many people don't understand about brain chemistry. And when they learn what they can do to heal their brain, it's pretty amazing. In addition to learning, they're also learning skills. And we see it week after week, how to manage their anger, how to address the feelings and defenses and healthy defenses they may use to address their pain, how to say no for kids, for parents, for whatever those situations, problem solving. And again, we really focus on how, when this program is over and your baby is crying at 2 in-the-morning, you're going to be able to manage that stress. How are you going to feel good about being a parent and be able to reduce the amount of stress and anxiety that you may be feeling? So really, really important. These are the things we learn every week. It's addressing the developmental assets and building people's confidence. That's what I see week after week. Let me share a little bit about the Celebrando Familias program and what we know about working with that community. And that's our next 2 slides, please. We see in Santa Clara County, next slide, please, that many of the families that we serve, some of the challenges for working with the Hispanic community, next slide, is we see, again, they need to understand the disease. That is something that many of our families that we serve don't understand, and we really focus on that. They lack access to care, and of course, the stigma about the addiction can be very powerful. We have a woman that just graduated from East San Jose, and she, her job, she sells fruit on one of our corners. And she had so much shame about her struggle with addiction. She didn't know how to get help for herself and her children. And so going through this program, she graduated by being online with her phone and participating in the program because she was giving hope and she knew that she could get her kids back, and she's in that process. So just shared that this model works just as well. In fact, their outcomes are just as strong, if not stronger, than the groups done in English. Our next piece I want to share with you is about that 0 to 3 supplement. I kind of talked about it already, but again, what the focus of that, next slide, and look at these beautiful babies. I love these pictures, but they're our next generation, and we can reduce the risk factors, the ACE factors, all those things by teaching and supporting parents to be able to be there with their child, to be comfortable, to be confident, and to bond and attach at this most important time in their life. In fact, we know the impact it has on their brain chemistry and their well-being. So it's a beautiful program, and whenever possible, again, this is when we really began to serve the whole program, when these kids were able to get their own process where they can learn and play and bond with their primary caregiver. Again, let's go on to our next slide. And this is just a little bit more about that, but I see this week after week. Parents walk in with zero confidence because they didn't know, they never learned to parent. They maybe didn't have their primary caregiver there, and now they learn they can do it and they find joy. So it's a really cool piece of the program. Again, let's go to our next slide, which is to share with you that, yes, our main goal is to break that intergenerational trauma, break that family cycle of addiction and abuse. And I see this happen week after week. For over 16 years, the results have been unbelievable. Let's look at that next slide, which gives you just a brief piece about what we see. We see families eating together, listening, anger management. We see health. So we see a large impact on parenting. We see families get back together. It's just been unbelievable. And what was super cool is we worked with San Jose State University, one of the professors over there, after doing the virtual groups, did a comparison study of our virtual groups as well as our in-person groups. And the results were just as positive. Quite frankly, we didn't expect it, but it works. So when you can work with the grandparents, the parents, the children, and even the grandchildren, we truly can break that cycle and make huge changes in our families. Just recently, we completed a group, and one of our group leaders sent us this, and not the group leader, but the parent said, "Hi, Miss Vanessa, this is one of our moms. I have exciting news. OMG, my boys are coming home today. I am so excited. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your love and support and encouragement. I learned so much from this program. Thank you. I love celebrating families." And that's just a mom a couple weeks ago who finished her program, and in that process was able to get her kids back. And you can hear her excitement, her confidence, and her joy. So yes, this is a program that works. Thank you for allowing me to share it. As you can see, I'm very passionate about it, and it's got a wonderful program, training, but the results are the families. And I know that we will break this cycle of addiction. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Tony. Great job with that. And we always hear your passion every time you're talking about celebrating families, whether it's a group like we have today or whether it's just one other individual in person. We can always feel that sense of passion that comes around this. Our next presenter that we're going to have today is Andre Stokes, and he's the Director of Specialty Substance Use Disorder Services at the Best Self Behavioral Health. Andre works with a variety of programs to service families and children. And so he's got a unique insight on celebrating families that he wants to take time to share with us today. Andre.
Thank you, Larry. Good afternoon, everyone. A pleasure to be here. So within Celebrating Families, there are several aspects that contribute to the families achieving success within a program. As Tony stated, the program is very unique and allows for opportunities for us to observe what works best for the families, for the children, and their overall process. That's a very important part of the process that we want to increase the chances of those families being successful within the program. So I'd like to take a moment to discuss some of those aspects that we found very important within the process. So the first aspect that I'd like to discuss is the dinner engagement. So within Celebrating Families, we found that the dinner engagement is one of the most important aspects in it, as it sets the tone and fosters the positive atmosphere for each family. We've seen, like as Tony stated, we've seen families who have never actually sat down together and had a meal together. We've come across a lot of families that had dinner on the go or ate dinner in other places. So a lot of families don't regularly have the opportunity to sit down and enjoy a full course meal as a unit. That time, the dinner time, is a great opportunity for the family members, the children, the guardians to actually slow down their pace and enjoy each other's company. When those simple things like having dinner together is very crucial to the overall recovery process, as this is a process for the whole family. During that time, during the dinner time, we've seen families share and receive updates with one another about how their days went, how their weeks have gone, and for some of the families with older children, where they are in their recovery. They get a chance to actually talk about the food and talk about some of the things that they may not have had a chance to go through throughout the week. Those semi-private moments are very intimate, and I think those are needed for the family to get together and to remain together. So it's those small things that play a much larger role within the bigger picture. The small things are actually the big things a lot of the times. Another important aspect is that the participants get to see other families who are in similar situations. So that particular aspect fosters a non-judgmental atmosphere where different families gain the opportunity to understand that they also have people who experience common issues, common barriers. In turn, that can create another positive atmosphere before even reviewing the curriculum. And they're reminded that they're all here for similar reasons and that they want to get through the engagement overall. The meal brings together supportive subgroups. We've seen subgroups being created from the mealtime, which creates more of a recovery atmosphere, and people are able to form other bonds with other family members. The second aspect that I'd like to discuss is having dedicated staff and facilitators. Having facilitators who are present, who are invested and are involved is a wonderful part of having the families remain in a program. One of the things that we've noticed is that staff who are dedicated bring out the best in the participants. When some people hear the word dedicated, they may think of just showing up to work on time and completing the assigned duties. But what dedicated actually means in this regard is having the facilitators who are genuinely invested in the well-being and the reunification of the family members. The participants often can get a sense of who's invested and who's not. Within the Celebrating Families program, we've done extra engagements throughout the curriculum, such as celebrating birthdays with cakes and songs, celebrating holidays with permission from the parents, and celebrating each other's achievements, such as good grades for the children and good attendance in school and so forth. Before COVID became a thing, we were able to get a few individuals to come in as Santa Claus, as the Easter Bunny, and we've done extra things such as create an opportunity to do in-house trick-or-treating on some of those during the Halloween week, which was a big hit for the children. So the family members are also able to feel as though the staff and facilitators are somewhat an extended part of the family unit, which is incredible. When you have dedicated staff, it's more of a curriculum. It's more than just a curriculum, it's an actual experience. So there may have been times when we've been fortunate enough to bring community agencies and churches together for additional support for the holidays, to bring in gifts for Christmas and so forth. And those sorts of things create the warmest environment possible. And that's what we're aiming to achieve within our families so that they can remain in the program. The final aspect is that children learn that they're not alone. The children have the opportunity to observe the commonalities with others in their age group. And this piece is very important, as the children are in most ways the most vulnerable individuals within the process. Although their situations have similarities, they may have experienced traumas in different ways, which can then frighten a lot of children. There were times where we've spoken to children and observed that their levels of interaction have changed depending on the surroundings. And within the beginning sessions, sometimes the children are a little reluctant to share until they realize that there are other children within the same age group who have similar experiences, and it creates a form of comfort. This can reduce the chances of the child being re-traumatized during the sessions. When the children learn that they're not alone, they're far more likely to succeed throughout their challenges and achieve positive results within the curriculum. In turn, that can translate to social relationships and within extracurricular activities. For further supports and fostering healthy relationships, that's one of the things that we would like to continue to do. So those were just a few of the many important aspects of the process that benefit the families and their overall process. And this concludes my piece, and thank you for your time.
All right, Andre, thank you for sharing some of the intimate details of what you saw that helped Celebrating Families to be successful with the dinner, the staff, and also that children recognize that they're never alone. Our final presenter for today is going to be Tanya Sakur. Tanya is currently serving as an Indigenous community facilitator at Red Deer Urban Aboriginal Voices and Society. And Tanya has a interesting, not only insight, but interesting stories that she can share about how she's been able to use Celebrating Families to change the lives of families. Tanya.
Oki, Tansei, Nataniko Bisawa Supatanski. My name is Tanya Ward Schur, and I'm in long-term recovery. I'm really honored to be here today and excited to share with you the Native American approach to celebrating families. I'm a Blackfoot Métis person. I was not raised with my culture, but when I learned that my grandma was a residential school survivor, I began to search for teachings to help me heal. And that's how I learned about Wellbriety Celebrating Families. I took the training in 2015 and worked in my community to implement the 16-week program with a handful of volunteers and a number of community partners. Today, I am a national white bison trainer, and I'm so passionate about Wellbriety Celebrating Families because I've seen it work in my own life and in the lives of my community members. Next slide. And next slide. White Bison is a Native American nonprofit organization, and since 1988, White Bison has been developing and delivering culturally based programs for individuals, families, and communities. White Bison offers sobriety, recovery, addictions, prevention, training, and wellness, Wellbriety resources to Native American communities in the United States, Canada, Mexico. And due to COVID, we've adapted our training to the online format, and we've offered trainings in New Zealand, Ireland, and Australia. So there's also lots of non-Native people who use this curriculums and attend Wellbriety programs and take trainings. Next slide. Through a cooperative effort between NACOA and White Bison, the Celebrating Families curriculum was adapted to provide Native families with a culturally appropriate program based on the principles of Native American culture and teachings of elders to assist families dealing with addiction and the effects of intergenerational trauma. So this exciting, evidence-based, family-centered, culturally competent program includes the Wellbriety Celebrating Families Facilitator Implementation Manual and training videos that provide a guide to the Native American teachings that support the Celebrating Families curriculum. Next slide, please. The teachings of Wellbriety go beyond being sober to thriving in healthy communities based on restoring our traditional cultures and our family values. We recognize that for sustainable Wellbriety to occur, we must go beyond treatment of an individual. We must heal the whole family and the whole community. We call this the healing forest. Families participating in Wellbriety Celebrating Families experience that sense of belonging to themselves, to the Creator, to each other, and back to their own culture. It builds a strong sense of belonging, of better relationships, and people get to gain the teachings of both addictions and recovery, as well as our cultural healing forest that builds that community support and reduces the risk of relapse. Next slide. A long time ago, before contact with European settlers, we Native people lived on this earth according to the Creator's principles, laws, and values. And by observing nature, we came to understand the unseen and the seen world, and that everything is interconnected. These teachings were the source of our Native culture. Each tribe had their own way of understanding this knowledge, and people maintained healthy, balanced lives. Our families were strong. Our communities were rooted in the spirituality, and the ceremonies were conducted in vibrant languages. The elders' teachings were passed from one generation to the next. And we didn't have the social issues that we see today. But then with the coming of European settlers, laws and legal policies aimed at destroying our culture and our connections were introduced. And then they did the unthinkable. They took the children away to the boarding schools. It was a deliberate attempt to destroy our culture by removing our children from our families and our communities, to destroy the language and to force children to adopt another language and another way of being. Our traditional way of life was replaced by a layer of guilt and shame and fear, and our family structures were completely destroyed. Then when children returned to their communities, they brought this anger, guilt, and shame back to the community. and the hurt that was experienced in one generation gets passed to the next generation, and that we began to see all of these impacts from this hurt and pain. We know now that what we're dealing with today are the effects of this trauma. And we realize that for Indigenous people, the problem of addiction must be dealt with through cultural revival and dealing with intergenerational trauma. In our teachings, we understand that everything we do impacts the next generation. So we need to think about how my actions today will impact others in the future. Hurt people hurt people. So then, isn't it also true that healed people will heal people? It is said by the elders that the effects of intergenerational trauma are passed from one generation to the next until someone is willing to feel the pain of that loss. And with Wellbriety Celebrating Families, we get to spend those weeks with our community members and our elders, learning and admitting, expressing and feeling the impacts of that trauma. Next slide. In Wellbriety Celebrating Families, the teachings are presented along with those addictions concepts that, that Tony talked about. Family living skills for every member of the family are presented with through age appropriate lessons. If we're going to see our families healed, we need to return to these teachings our way so that our families see themselves in the curriculum, and Celebrating Families just parallels our traditional teachings so perfectly. Next slide. For Native Americans, the circle is the sacred piece. The circle represents balance and represents the Indigenous worldview. Now, many of our cultural teachings are based on the circle, and they are formed and found within the Celebrating Families curriculum. There was nothing that needed to be removed from the curriculum. We just layered the cultural overlay, and that overlay can be adapted for each tribe and their different teachings because it's so complementary. We bring these families together, we teach the talking circle principles. We create that sense of belonging and strengthen the connections to culture, to spirit, and to each other and to community. We introduce the smudge ceremony as the centering activity each session, and that's how we prepare for the session. We use our traditional songs, and our elders help us so much. The skills of speaking and active listening are reinforced, and the talking circle protocol becomes a family practice that gets practice outside of our times. Next slide. Now, you've already heard about the structure of Celebrating Families programs and its effectiveness, but to address the effects of intergenerational trauma in Native American families, White Bison has included sessions dealing directly with the boarding school legacy and healing intergenerational trauma, the 4 directions of forgiveness, of the medicine wheel, the healing forest and healing community. Natural laws apply with the life cycle teachings, the power of the talking circle and how the talking circle is a conflict resolution tool, rites of passage and family dynamics, and the teachings of the eagle feather and effective relationships. So this curriculum is so powerful because our participants see themselves in it. They hear their language in it as well. Next slide. So all of these teachings are passed week by week. And so those 16 sessions are supplemented by the traditional teachings. So the family structure is a little bit different, but to help you understand how effective this program is, I want to share with you the story of how we implemented Wellbriety Celebrating Families as a pilot project at the Red Deer Native Friendship Society. We created a partnership with White Bison, Alberta Health Addiction Services, the Public School Board, First Nations, Métis and Inuit family wellness workers, and a group of volunteers. White Bison trained 20 facilitators for Wellbriety Celebrating Families, including 4 community elders that provided weekly cultural support to the program. We accepted 6 families into the program and met weekly at the school board community office. Meals were prepared by volunteer groups of people, including family members, and recipes and leftovers were sent home with families each week. Groceries were donated by the local food bank, and supplementary material about nutrition was supplied by the local health unit. Each session, we started with a smudge, a drum song, and a prayer as a centering activity. And then we did family table talks over the dinner. And each family table had a facilitator to help that table talk and address questions or concerns that families were having between sessions. We gave each family kind of a sponsor, coach, to connect with between sessions. They became a living resource. And then when we went out to our age appropriate groups. And when we came back, we sat in circle where an elder would provide a cultural perspective and there would be a family conversation to connect and share their experiences. We always closed with a smudge and a prayer, and everyone shared in the cleaning up of the classrooms. So we met from 5 to 8 each week for 16 weeks. And I have to tell you that those 6 families are all still connected. That's from 2015, all still connected to the Indigenous community, still working with Red Deer Native Friendship Society. And although the parents some of them aren't together, they are all still co-parenting in a good way and maintain their connections to culture and to the elders. Last slide. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to share Wellbriety Celebrating Families, and I'll be happy to share any answers to questions during the question period. Here's the information to learn more about Native American programs that address the effects of intergenerational trauma. And I'd like to thank you for being here and to the association for giving us this opportunity to share this program with you.
All right. Thank you, Tanya. Great job with that. Great insights to kind of show us about how celebrating families can be adaptable. I just wanted to do just a quick kind of wrap up from each one of our presenters today. Judge Lasario just reminded us during her presentation that it's interesting because she said one of the primary issues that families are facing today, from her perspective and what she sees, is just this concept of addictions. And she said that one of the things that she's noticed about celebrating families is that it's a tool that she knows will bring healing to the families that are a part of the program. She also says that celebrating families, one of the uniquenesses is that it gives families a language. And for some families, it's the very first time they've been able to really find the words to share what they're really experiencing and really what's going on with them. But the greatest thing is that it brings a sense, or it provides a sense of hope, especially to those families that have been living from one generation to the next generation without feeling any sense of hope. So I wanted to thank her for bringing those insights about celebrating families. And then Tony came on and she walked us through the entire process of how celebrating families works. She also reminded us that it's a strength-based curriculum. And so one of the things that we think about in a strength-based curriculum is that we focus on what's working in the families rather than what's broken. And sometimes families don't recognize what's broken because either themselves or other individuals that are a part of their life have so focused on what's broken, that they don't realize that there are some things that are actually working. And so it is a strength-based curriculum. We do focus on what's working with the families and how can we help them to build upon that. In the process of focusing on, how can we break the cycles of addiction? And then Tony reminded us that, we celebrating families focuses on risk factors, but it also focuses on protective factors. And we build that into the curriculum and we share that with the families. One of the tools that celebrating families bring that I've noticed that when I'm doing trainings, the families really recognize and they love, and that is the acts of kindness. Some families that are a part of the addiction process and focus on, they don't focus on, I'm sorry, on how to give back. And so those acts of kindness are just a way that individuals, even children, can focus on giving something back. And so every week they'll come in and they'll talk about, hey, this is what I did for someone else this week. So it's about not just taking, but it's about pouring back and giving something back. And then the other thing, or the other tool, or one of the other tools that Celebrating Families brings to the table is the wow moments, wonders of the world. And we share with families about taking some time every single day to just focus on and to be able to see the beauty that's in the world. Even with all of the chaoses that they may be experiencing and the other things that may not be going so well, we help change their perspective, or Celebrating Families helps change their perspective and allows them to be able to see some of the small things or the beauty that the world has to give. And not that everything is a challenge and everything is ugly. And so those are the wow moments, the wonders of the world. And every single session, they're going to come in and they're going to share something about those. It's about working with the entire family. Tony shared with us that even if grandparents are there, anybody that has a vested interest in the children's lives and in the parents' lives are welcome to come to the program. And they learn the exact same tools. There's a meal that's provided at every session. Families come together, and Andre reminded us that those meals are extremely important because for some of those families, it's the very first time they've ever sat down together to really have a meal together as a family. For many of our families, they're on the run, they're moving from one destination to the next destination. This begins to model and teach a valuable lesson for them. And the lesson is that they're important and they take time to simply be a part of each other's lives. And we use dinner as a tool to make that happen. And so the dinner is extremely important. It allows families to get together and connect with each other and to be able to share what's going on. And at the program, every single time we meet, we always start the program off with a meal and they get a chance to connect and they have the opportunity to share with each other. Andre also reminded us that we need to have a dedicated staff and facilitators, individuals that are willing to make an investment in the participants that are there. People can tell when you're invested in them or whether you're just actually doing your job. And so Andre reminded us that we need to have a staff that are actually invested in the individuals that are there, and it makes a major difference for them. And the final piece, or the final thing that he shared with us, is that one of the benefits he saw of Celebrating Families is that children learn that they're not alone and that there are other individuals that are also a part of experiencing some of the exact same things that they're experiencing. Tanya, and I'm going to give Tanya an opportunity to share. She missed a couple of details that she wanted to share. But one of the things that Tanya shared with us is that Celebrating Families, she's discovered, really, really helps to be able to deal with this intergenerational trauma. And I love the fact that they start and they close every single session with a smudge, because I think that is so cool. Tanya, any other insights you had? Because I just saw you sent me something as a chat.
Yeah. I was just really thinking about, I saw some of the comments in the chat. We had a family, dad was sent to the program through his probation officer. And we know that often when our men and women coming out of incarceration are sent to a program, that adherence isn't always authentic. And he kind of got through the first session and approached me and said, This is totally different. This feels more like my coming back to the elders and to the songs and to my life before I ended up in prison. And he's now, since 2015, a person that is also working on different trainings to become a trainer, to help. He's working to get his son back in his life. And so, you know, I really think that the environment that's set through Celebrating Families, by having that opportunity to share a meal together, for all of our kids to be in groups of other kids that are like them, and that this opportunity is not just for the adults, but it's for each one of the people that come to the program, to the sessions. And it's so powerful. We didn't think it would work with teens. We know our teenagers in our community. We thought, one, these kids are not connected to their families, number one. They're not connected to their parents, and they sure as heck aren't going to want to come to a group. They're going to eat and they're going to all take off. That's what we anticipated. So, you know, because if you feed them, they'll come. That's for sure. But they ate and they stayed because of those coached family table talks, because their voice was protected. And then they got to, you know, be in a group and hang out with other kids who, you know, also started with, you know, arms folded, legs crossed, mouths, you know, closed completely. But it wasn't very many weeks before those teenagers we saw the change in them. They were asking, can we help? Hey, how about if all the teenagers cook a meal? Could we do that? Like, we really want to do something in our community. And so we really saw that by acknowledging where they were at and what their experiences was, that whole legacy of don't speak, don't tell was broken, and that they were a part of a larger community, so that even if they were struggling at home with something their parents were doing, they knew that they had people in the community that would look after them and that they could talk to. So it's just so powerful. I'm so passionate. I just really encourage you, don't be afraid to start this program in your community. Everything you need will be provided. So thank you.
So can I add something?
Sure, Shirley.
So good to meet you, Tanya. I'm from Red Lake. It's in northern Minnesota, with the Ojibwe Anishinaabe. Anyway, I was involved in a program in the urban area a few years ago, and it was through a school. And it was a after school program anyway. And the facilitator used the White Bison curriculum, and it was really awesome because they always would do a smudge, and she'd have a pipe ceremony, and then she would go through the training, you know, starting with the healing forest and how the trauma started, you know, with the colonialism and the removal of the children. That's a really tough part to go through, because sometimes it re-triggers, you know, intergenerational trauma. So she did it very sensitively, you know, because you know, especially right now too, with the 215 that were just discovered in BC, there's so many natives I know that have been through boarding schools or are children of survivors that have re-triggered the trauma. But as time went along, she would introduce more like upbeat things and positive things about how to keep the families together. And then she had them make their own talking stick so they could use it once they left the program. And it was a whole year-long program. It wasn't 16 weeks, it was a whole year. It was awesome. And it gives a lot of like tools to the families to have that in their programming. So miigwech for your sharing. The other thing too I wanted to point out is that White Bison, you have to pay, there's a cost, right? There's a fee for that curriculum. That's my understanding. And I think most programs, they have it in their grants. So when they apply for the grant, they add it into their budgets. So that's how they pay for that curriculum. And it's awesome training. A couple of people I know went through the training and they go through it. And once they go through it, they can implement it in their communities, which is wonderful, because these are more tools for our people to utilize. And I'm just like impressed too that other people are using it other than natives. So that's really awesome. Miigwech.
Thank you, Shirley. Great job. Andre, you had something else you wanted to share before we get ready for our wrap up?
Yes, thank you, Larry. I appreciate it. I think it's important to reiterate the fact that celebrating families, with it being so unique, you can, in a lot of ways, you can customize the program. You can customize the experience, and it's somewhat unlimited in what you can do. Of course, we will follow the curriculum and go through the materials that we will always go through, but we can always gear certain things towards the audience, which I think is very important. And adding cultural pieces to it, adding different types of holidays, of course, with permission from the participants. Those things increase the grasp within the audience. And when we can hold on to our families and our participants, they're more likely to stay. And they may see it as traditional treatment at first, but if you can grab them and engage them in several different ways, they're more likely to stay, and they'll complete the program, which will in turn reunify the family unit. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
All right, our time's just about over. And before we do that, I do want to do just like a short wrap up for us. And I wanted to share, we've heard about celebrating families and we've heard about how it works. I wanted to share just a small story with you guys before we close. I was out visiting a site in rural Oklahoma a few years ago. And I was visiting for another program, just evaluating another program. And it was a graduation, and there was a mom that came up to me. She wasn't a part of that program. She was there as a family member supporting someone else who was a part of the program. And she walked over and she simply said, I heard that you are a Celebrating Families trainer. And you know, when people say that, you never have any idea what's going to follow behind that. And I said, yes. She says, listen, I went through the program and I need to share with you how powerful it was for not only myself, but for my family. She says, I grew up in a small little town here in Oklahoma. Since then, I've moved to the large city of Oklahoma City. She said, but in the town that I grew up in was a real small rural town. And my father was an alcoholic. And she says, you know, as a matter of fact, the word that we all used and everybody in the town used was my father was the town drunk. And she said, as a small kid, I carried that with me every single day. At school, no matter where I went, it was always there. That stigma was there. And I thought, why couldn't I be born to another family, or why couldn't I have another dad? And she says, you know what? It was horrible. It was difficult for me to grow up in that environment. And she says, I carried that even as an adult, the shame and everything that went along with that. She said, and I wasn't quite sure about celebrating families, but I came each week. And she said, it all turned around for me when we got to session 9. And I said, well, what made it so special about session 9? She said, at session number 9, you put up on the slide one of our demonstrations and our truth statements. Somebody put up on the slide this phrase. And we had these affirmations every single night, and the affirmation came up on the screen. And this is what it said. And she pulled out this little plastic card that she had typed the affirmation out, and she carried it with her in her purse. Let me share with you what the affirmation said. It says, I didn't cause it. I can't cure it. I can't control it, but I can help take care of myself one day at a time. The amazing thing is, she said, when I read that and when I heard that for the very first time, the shame and the guilt disappeared. Because all these years as a child and as an adult, I always carried the guilt of thinking I could have done something to make my dad different. And being in this program taught me that I didn't cause this, and my job or my main responsibility is to take care of myself. And I can do that. And now I've learned how, just through you guys helping me at Celebrating Families, I've learned how to take care of my 3 kids also. I wanted to be able to share that with us as I get ready to close my section here, to remind us that Celebrating Families it's not just a program, it's a tool to change people's lives. And as Judge Losario reminded us at the beginning of our time today, it's a way to bring hope back into people's lives and to remind them that things can be different. Thank you guys for allowing me to come. And I wanted to say thank you to each one of the panelists that we had today and the insight that they were able to share. We're finishing up just a little bit early, but that'll give us just a little bit more time for questions and answers. And so I'm going to turn it back over. I saw some of you in the chat have been asking where you could get the Celebrating Families, but now we'll answer that before we leave. But let's open it up for our questions and our answers.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you all so much for your presentations. We do have a lot of questions, and we're going to try to get to as many as possible. If we cannot address your question, we will address it in the FAQ that will be distributed post-webinar. Our first question was, for states that lack agencies and resources to help parents with addiction, what alternatives do you all recommend for treatment?
Yeah, we were in that situation. We are a little tiny center. We really started to look at who was also doing this work and had money, like schools, because really schools have family wellness money. We looked at the provincial or the state health agencies. We looked at corrections, and we just told them, we have this idea and here's what it's going to cost. And we just kind of added, 5 cents here and 5 cents there until we had enough money to pay for the training. White Bison actually sponsored the training because we were one of the first agencies or first times in Canada that Celebrating Families had been piloted. So yeah, partners, go to your partners, other people that are struggling with the same issues. Does that help?
I have another, some more information. I worked at a state agency, and I know that there's a new, maybe it's not new, but SAMHSA just put out a notice that there's funding available, and it's through block grant funding. So what I would recommend is contact your state health and human services agency, if that's what they're called. In Minnesota, it's called Minnesota Department of Human Services, and there's a behavioral health division, and contact that head person and find out how they'll be allocating that funding that's coming from SAMHSA, because there's a ton of money right now for prevention and for substance use. And there's also, what I saw was a big pot of money dealing with incarcerated parents, because it started with, I think, a few million, and now it's at 51 million for programs to help with incarcerated parents. So there's more funding coming. You just got to be, on those listservs to get those funding notices. And I send them out too to my grantees all the time.
Great, thank you. Our next question is about the Celebrating Families program, I believe. What are the graduation criteria?
Thank you for the question. For us, the graduation criteria is that we have the families in attendance. So our program works with the Family Treatment Drug Court of Erie County, New York, and we are partnered with them. So we have a very close relationship with the court coordinators, the court case managers, and so forth. So we work together to communicate their treatment, their outpatient substance use treatment, as well as their involvement with our Family Connections program. If they are continuing with their outpatient substance use treatment and mental health treatment, as well as complete the other things on their that they may have on their menu, then the court will keep them in the program. So we take the participants who are allowed by the court. And as far as the graduation, as long as the families are participating and they're present and they're following the basic rules, such as not using within 24 hours of presenting to the site and those sorts of things, then they can make it through. But of course, we also ask for the participation and the positive attitude where applicable. Granted, there are some things that some people go through, but we ask that they just put in some effort and put in the time and the work, and they'll make it through.
Great. Thank you, Andre.
You're welcome.
Our next question is, what are some of the most salient, protective, and risk factors, individual and community, that families are facing? And if we can also address this in the FAQ, if that is, if we want to move on to the next one.
Okay.
Okay. How can family-focused services be used in cases of incarceration of parents? How can advocates push for family time within the confines of the carceral system? Should we push, or is it adding trauma to the child's experience?
What I would say is it depends on the program and what the program policies are, because some places are more open, about having parents and children visit. I know out here in Minnesota at the women's prison, they really encourage the caretakers to bring the children into prison. So it depends on the place where they're at, the facility. And what I would do is, if I were an agency that serviced families, I would contact the prison that the parents are asking about and see what their policies are and work with the policies. Because there's a way to do something without like pushing, and then you're not getting them upset with you, because you really want to work with the systems that are there. And I think too, at least some of the research that I've read, they really encourage family interaction throughout the process when they're incarcerated. And then there's also programming sometimes for the incarcerated parents that are inside the facilities.
Okay, great, thank you. This question might have been related to Tony's presentations. Were results of the virtual model similar to the in-person model? I don't know if anyone else can address that.
I can address that as well.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Larry. The results to the virtual model from my experiences, were very similar to the results from the in-person model. So we, as Tony stated earlier, she didn't think that it would be as high as it was, and that's exactly what we had experienced on our end as well. So when we started to, when COVID began, we were in session 4 or 5 of the current cohort. So that's where the transition became a little difficult, because we had to pause the cohort for a few weeks, and it was maybe a month and a half until we figured out what was really going on. And then we decided to continue the cohort virtually. We had some barriers and challenges with that as we transitioned, due to a lot of folks not understanding how to use Zoom and some of the technological aspects that were involved. However, we provided a lot of coaching and a lot of practice Zoom sessions so that people could understand how to use Zoom, how to mute themselves, how to log in, how to log out, and so forth. And once our families got used to it, we were able to get right back into the swing of things. And we had to modify parts of the curriculum, because parts of the curriculum do require in-person activities and so forth. So we modified a lot of the sessions to make them virtual platform friendly. And from there, we were able to continue the cohort, and we were able to keep the families that we had within that cohort, except for one. So it worked out pretty well, and we've played back and forth with going back in person, but we experienced some challenges, and we went to the virtual platform once again, and it's continued to be successful.
And I thought I heard Tony share just a little bit that she was surprised that their online version of Celebrating Families worked out as well as the in-person, and that even surprised her.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Their next question, is this a diversion process? How do you keep families involved throughout the program?
I'll take just a short bit of that. I think a part of what keeps families engaged during the process is the dinner. Dinner provides a good incentive for families being there each week. And even though it seems as if it's a long time for families to attend, uh, the program is constantly keeps moving and individuals are learning skills that they can literally see are helping and changing them right in the moment. So I think in the beginning, they come for dinner and because sometimes they just really need to be there. And then also they develop friendships. And so towards the middle or the end of the sessions, they come because they develop relationships with other individuals. And to be real honest, they've developed relationships with the group leaders and the facilitators also. And so it becomes a different or an extension of their family, and they want to come and connect. So that's what I've seen of why they really continue to show up for that long of a period of time.
Great, thank you, Larry. How do clients get to the sessions? Transportation is a huge barrier across the country. Can anyone share the ways that they provide transportation and the policies around transporting clients?
I can start at the second question and then go to the first one. I think the policies around transportation has to do with the organization that's conducting the program, that they have policies around transporting clients and other things. You would go with that policy. I've seen it done a variety of ways when we think about transporting participants and families. Uh, some sites will use gasoline cards that as incentives that they give to their families for coming. Others have collaborated with faith-based organizations, and the faith-based organizations will have like vans or buses or some other modes of transportation that they will pick up families at their home and bring them to the program and then deliver them back at their home at the end of the program. Uh, there have even been sites that have used Uber and other transportation, organizations to kind of get their families there and get their families back home. However you can do that, you become creative and you just do it. Any of the other panelists, how have you seen that happen at your sites?
I'll jump in.
Oh.
So within our sites, as far as transportation goes, since we're working with the family treatment drug court process, we are part of our program is to encourage them to maintain their own transportation. And if in extenuating circumstances, we will have access to transportation, to bus tokens and things like that. But with our program being linked to court, it's more of a you're responsible for your own transportation type of atmosphere. And we have seen that that's worked because when the individuals who are referred to the program, when they are referred, they're happy that they've made it that far within the court process to be referred. So we haven't seen too many transportation barriers. And the other aspect that helps with that is the site is centrally located. So there are several buses that can get to the site from just about anywhere, from anywhere in the city.
Are there Celebrating Family programs for Asian cultures? That anyone's aware of?
I am not sure, but I think one of the things that we learned from Tanya's presentation is that the program is extremely adaptive. And so you may check in one of the Asian communities where you're located to just kind of see. And you could always call our corporate office because they usually kind of keep track of where we've held trainings, and you could see that way. And we'll put up the contact information either in the chat or on our last slide.
Okay, great. I think we have time for one more question. Is the program an open enrollment or does it require start from session 1? Have you experienced any families that dropped out during the 16-week course, and how does that work?
From our experiences, the program is you have to start from session 1 all the way to 16. We don't have families that come in on different sessions, such as coming in session 3, 4, 5, and 6. We have to have the individual start from session 1 and then make it all the way to 16.
And the reason for that is that each session builds upon the previous session.
Yes.
And so as they pick up a skill at session 1, session 2, the skills they get will build upon what they picked up at the previous session.
Can I just add to the transportation issue? You know, I've discovered in a lot of tribal communities, and they are rural, transportation is a huge issue. So what some of the grantees that I know have done, they write it into the grants to have transportation costs be a part of the grants. And I know another tribe, what they've done is they have to go through certain kinds of training, but they can bill it through Medicare, I think, or it's called a third-party billing process, and it's a whole different type of process, but it's more like permanent. So that they just have to have special training to get that, to access that funding.
Great, thank you all so much. We've actually come to the end of our time. Just a few quick reminders before Larry has the final word. A reminder to please watch for and complete the post-event survey to be distributed via SurveyMonkey. And this provides us with feedback to support future development efforts. Today's webinar recording and slides will be distributed to all participants within 2 weeks. And again, a reminder about the CEUs. If anyone's interested in CEUs, please email ovc-tta@jbsinternational.com, and a certificate will be emailed within the coming weeks. Also listed on the slide are the next 3 sessions of the NACOA series, so we hope you all can join us for those. And Larry, I'm turning over to you for final remarks.
Our closing affirmations at our programs, one of the affirmations simply says, I put my hand in yours, and together we can do what we could never do alone. Keep coming back. It works. Thank you guys for letting us share and have this time with you.